This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
Hey everyone, it's Claire.
And it's Susan. And this is Justice Pending, where we dive deep into stories of justice delayed, denied, or desperately demanded.
Today's episode reads like a crime novel, but unfortunately, it's all too real. It's the story of Alexandra Fröhlich, a best-selling German author whose books explored family secrets, trauma, and identity. This is another case that came our way thanks to a listener. So shout out to Cassie Burleson for flagging this one.
Let's set the scene. On April 23rd, 2025, Alexandra was found dead, violently killed on her pink houseboat moored along the Elbe River in Hamburg. And what started as a murder mystery took a shocking turn when police arrested someone very close to home.
Yes, I was actually researching this case when the arrest news came down. So I was like, wow, there is a real-time development in this one. So today we'll unpack Alexandra's legacy, the crime scene details, and the unraveling case against her 22-year-old son, who's now suspected of her murder.
Ooh, let's start with Alexandra herself. So she was 58. A mother of three, and a force in German literature. Her first book, My Russian Mother-in-Law and Other Catastrophes, became a Spiegel bestseller, which is kind of a German New York Times list.
And she wasn't afraid to use her real life as material. That debut was drawn from her own marriage to a Russian man. Later novels like There's Always Someone Dying and Skeletons in the Closet blended quirky humor, family dysfunction, and deep psychological insight.
She was also a journalist. She started out in Kyiv, where she even founded a women's magazine in the early post-Soviet days. She described herself as fascinated by wonderfully dysfunctional family dynamics, which makes what happened next feel surreal.
Oh, absolutely. So it's the morning of April 23rd. One of Alexandra's sons finds her lifeless body on her long pink houseboat. And it's just after 5 a.m. He is actually the one who calls 911.
And emergency services arrived, but there was nothing they could do. The initial cause of death wasn't released, but it didn't take long for police to launch a full murder investigation.
That's right. So divers were sent into the Elbe River, forensic teams combed the boat, and speculation ran wild. Media outlets reported she had been shot. Then later reports pointed to something else, something more brutal, blunt force trauma.
Her houseboat, by the way, was striking. A 90 square meter Cerise vessel with large porthole windows. She'd moved in just 6 months before with her children. She called it her retreat.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it. It really looks like something out of a cartoon or, something that you would just draw up if you were thinking of an idyllic houseboat. It was so large and, it looked like a beautiful place to spend some time on the water and have, a retreat, have a peaceful existence. It's so tragic that her, dream of living on this houseboat would end this way. So who would want to harm Alexandra? Police initially stayed quiet about potential suspects, and that, was causing a lot of speculation about who they were looking at. And then came the bombshell. Her 22-year-old son was arrested on suspicion of murder.
And that's where this story, I think, really shifts from mystery to tragedy. According to reports, investigators believe he beat her to death in the early hours of April 22nd, sometime between midnight and 5:30 a.m.
Yeah, it's really horrific. And the fact that initial reports indicated that it was a gunshot wound, I think that tells you how violent the crime scene was. So they were diving in the river looking for a gun. Like they really believed that there had to be a weapon used. And it's just, it's hard to fathom. And it's so sad. I don't know if it's the same son who called 911. Interesting fact about true crime cases, 1/3 of the time, the person who calls 911 is actually the killer, Susan.
Wow, that's terrifying.
It really is. And so police have to look at the person who reports the crime and rule them out before they do anything else. Like statistically, there's a chance, 33% chance that the person who calls is going to be involved in the murder. So her son was arrested without resistance and is now in custody. Under German law, this isn't the same thing as being charged like in the US. It's a preliminary step based on their suspicions. But still, it's her son. So this is just devastating for her family.
And yes, and given her career, it's eerie, Claire, because Alexandra wrote exactly about this kind of thing, not matricide specifically, but the buried tensions in families and how trauma travels from generation to generation, how secrets don't stay secret, that sort of family dynamic.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe that this would happen to her when she seemed to be so in touch with these types of risks and so sensitive to family dynamics and like self-aware. So the idea that this would, happen in her home is just all the more tragic. And so, even with the arrest, while we have, a suspect in custody, we don't know why, Susan. No motive has been released, and there are no details on what might have led to such an unthinkable act. I think people automatically go to mental illness, and I think there's, definitely reason to explore that. I think the idea that someone who could kill their own parent is not well. I think we can all agree with that. But was there like a diagnosis? Was someone off their medication? What could this be? Is it a family fight? We don't know yet what might be the motive. And, in my experience, we might never get it.
Yeah, we don't know how public all of this will become. And, the family is staying pretty private, as you could imagine. They, so we don't know how the rest of her family is doing. Alexandra had 3 sons. So 2 others presumably are, just having to deal with this tragedy, losing their mother and currently their other sibling. So, readers too, mourning a voice that meant something. They describe her as a woman who made pain readable and somehow even funny. So to lose that type of authorship and perspective is a tragedy to the book community.
Yeah, absolutely. And just taken, so suddenly, so violently, so unjustly. I think a lot of times if, there's a tragic accident, if the boat had sunk, if there's a car crash, like people can come to terms with those types of unexpected tragic events. But the idea that this did not, this was a choice that someone made. This was not an accident. And so that just hits different. I think, this story has really grabbed a hold of the headlines. I was reading about it in People magazine. It's been in the New York Post. It's been in the Guardian. It's been all over the world. So people have, really connected with this story. And I hope that, Alexandra's legacy is told through this, that, we don't just think about how she lost her life, but we look at how she lived. And, I look forward to reading her books now. I had not heard of her as an author, but the description of, her subject matter certainly appeals to me. The fact that she started a magazine in Kyiv, Ukraine, is really interesting to me too. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine and spent a lot of time in Kyiv, and, still read the Kyiv Post. And I really felt a connection to her, and the fact that she was a journalist and then she wrote a book. Hey, I can relate, so this
Let's hope your story does not end quite the same way, though, Claire.
My goodness, let's definitely hope and pray that doesn't happen. But it was, I felt a real connection to her whenever my friend Cassie, sent in this story as something that, I should look into for the podcast. I was just stunned, at the life this woman had lived and all the ways that she had, contributed to journalism and to publishing, and that she's just been taken from us. It's so sad. And, I hope that her family is able to get, some measure of justice and understand, what happened. I just can't imagine what they're going through.
I know. And now she becomes the subject of a story she didn't write, but one that will certainly be told in court and in headlines.
Yes, I don't think this story is over. I know people are going to continue to look into this case. And I know that police are still asking the public to come forward with anything suspicious they might have seen that night. I think there will probably be, many months of investigation that go forward. I don't have experience with the German courts. I haven't ever worked a murder case there, but I am curious, like, what their discovery process might be like, and how will they go forward with this case? Will it take years, to go to trial? Maybe there's a plea deal. There's still lots of unknowns in this case, but I think the fact that there has been an arrest, as shocking and horrifying as it is that it's her own son, people have at least some measure of understanding that there's not a public risk, that, this was a domestic matter, and, the suspected killer is being held right now. So I think that does allow the community to begin to heal in that way.
Agree. And, it is unfortunately also a moment to remember the human cost behind the headlines. There's a brilliant woman, a family shattered, and a justice system still at work. We're all very, we'll be watching this case closely.
Definitely. It's not over. Justice is pending. But this story was one that, I wanted to make sure our listeners in the U.S. heard about, if it wasn't on their radar, because I think that Alexandra, deserves to be remembered, and she mattered. She was bold, smart, curious, and she gave us stories that helped people better understand themselves and their families.
Yep. Her voice certainly shouldn't fade away. So thank you for the listener submission on this one. If you have a case you want us to cover, reach out at justisepending.com, and, we're listening. And until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and stay tuned.
Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanamaw, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.